Hello everyone, and welcome to the endocrine system video. Hopefully you've printed out the handout with the questions, and we're going to go through those. So first question is, what is the function of the endocrine system? And the next question is, what is a hormone? Keep those questions in mind as you watch this short video.
The endocrine system is a collection of organs called endocrine glands that are located in various parts of the body. These glands secrete chemical messengers called hormones directly into the bloodstream, which then carries them to their destinations throughout the body.
You can think of the endocrine and nervous systems as two parts of a single control system. The nervous system sends and receives messages through nerve cells. It must often react very quickly to stimulate a response, such as pulling your fingers away from a hot stove so you don't get burned. In contrast to nerve impulses, hormones travel much slower. They control responses that don't have to be immediate, but do need to be more generalized and longer lasting, so they take a slower route to their destinations via the bloodstream.
Hormones can be divided into two general chemical groups, steroids and non-steroids. Steroids include all of the sex hormones produced by the ovaries and testes, estrogens, progesterone, and testosterone, and substances from the adrenal cortex of the kidney, such as cortisol and a form of vitamin D. Non-steroid hormones include proteins, such as insulin from the pancreas, growth hormone from the pituitary gland, and molecules called amines, such as thyroid hormone from the thyroid gland. Steroids are part of a group of biological molecules called lipids or fats. Lipids don't dissolve in water, so they're referred to as hydrophobic, which literally means water-fearing. In order to be transported through water-based bodily fluids such as the blood, lipids must combine with protein molecules to form lipoproteins. Non-steroid hormones are water-soluble, so they are called hydrophilic or water-loving. They can travel through the blood as they are. Hormones act on target cells. Each target cell has a receptor protein for its specific hormone molecule. The receptor and the hormone attach to each other exclusively, like a lock and key. Because cell membranes are made primarily of lipids, all lipids can easily enter or leave cells, so the receptors for lipids are inside the cell. Water-soluble proteins and amine molecules can't cross the waterproof lipid cell membrane on their own, so their receptors are located on the outside of the cell membrane. But the receptor protein extends through the membrane and is attached to a signal protein on the inside.
Each type of cell has a different set of receptor proteins. So, the same hormone generates different responses in different types of cells, or no response at all, depending on the specific set of receptor proteins the cells contain.
Once a hormone has attached to a receptor, the receptor causes a specific change inside the cell through a process called signal transduction.
Okay, let's put this one to watch. So hopefully you got the answers to those questions and more. So the function of the endocrine system, it is a controlling system that uses hormones, which travel through the blood, to regulate the metabolic activities of other cells. And then the next question is, what is a hormone? Well, a hormone is a chemical messenger that travels through the blood and regulates the metabolic activities of other cells. Next we need to know the three classes of hormones. That video talked about steroid hormones and protein hormones, and depending on which book you read, they have different names. So your book has three classes: the amino acid derivatives, which you can see up here, they come from amino acids. They look very similar to amino acids, so that's why they have that name. And then there are peptide hormones, which are small proteins. And then the third class would be the lipid derivatives, such as the steroid hormones. video talked about where the different ones have receptors. We'll go into that later on here. So these amino acid and peptide hormones would be what we call hydrophobic, and these lipid derivatives would be hydrophilic. Alright, 7 organs of the endocrine system. Hypothalamus, here in the brain, pituitary gland, also in the brain, thyroid gland, in your throat, adrenal glands on top of your kidneys, the pancreas down here below your stomach, pineal gland, your brain, and parathyroid glands on the back of your thyroid gland. We'll talk about these other organs later. Why do hormones need receptors, and what is a hormone receptor? So, like we said, this is where the protein hormones, it can't go through the cell membrane, so it has to have a receptor outside the cell. And then the receptor is going to cause something to happen, such as activating this G protein. So hormones need receptors to do their job, and like you mentioned, different cells have different receptors for different hormones. So for example, a bone cell is going to have a lot of receptors for growth hormone. It's going to grow in response to that. A nerve cell is not going to have a lot of receptors for growth hormone, because once your nervous system is established, it doesn't grow very much. So a hormone receptor is just something in the cell that the hormone binds to. And what is a second messenger? Second messenger is something inside the cell that sends the message from the hormone. You think of it as like carrying the baton from the hormone. So many times that involves a G protein, and we can see a couple of examples of what that G protein can do. It can alter the levels of something called cyclic AMP, which acts as a third messenger. So in this case, this G protein is activated. It's activating cyclic AMP, which then can either open ion channels or activate enzymes, or it could break down cyclic AMP, and then it's going to do the opposite. It's not going to open ion channels, and it's going to activate enzymes. Or it could open calcium channels, and calcium can act as a second messenger also, and it can activate other enzymes. The receptors for steroid hormones, since they're hydrophilic, the receptor will be inside the cell, maybe even in the nucleus. What is a regulatory hormone? And regulates the hypothalamus, regulates endocrine function. So a regulatory hormone is going to regulate other hormones, and the hypothalamus releases a lot of these. For example, growth hormones released from the pituitary gland, and in the hypothalamus we release either growth hormone releasing hormone or growth hormone inhibiting hormone. So a regulatory hormone is going to regulate the release of other hormones, and the 3 ways the hypothalamus regulates endocrine function. First, it acts as an endocrine organ. It produces 2 hormones, ADH and oxytocin, which we'll talk about later. The second way is that it secretes regulatory hormones, which go to the pituitary gland and cause either the release or to stop the release of certain hormones. And then the third way is that it contains nerves. These nerves go to the adrenal gland, and they can cause the release of epinephrine and norepinephrine. So it's an endocrine organ, so it produces hormones. It also secretes regulatory hormones, and then it can use nerves to cause the release of still more hormones. Which part of the pituitary gland contains endocrine cells? And if we look at the pituitary gland, the anterior part contains endocrine cells. The posterior part is more nerve cells. the 7 hormones released by the anterior pituitary gland that give growth function. So again, here's the anterior pituitary inside the cell tersica. And the hormones it releases, a lot of controlling hormones. So first is TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, which goes to the thyroid gland and causes it to release thyroid hormone. Next is ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone, which goes to the adrenal gland and causes it to release hormones. The next are FSH and LH, which go to the ovaries and testes. FSH is going to stands for follicle stimulating hormones. It stimulates follicles in the ovary, stimulates maturation of the developing sperm in males. LH in females causes ovulation. In males, it causes the production of androgen by interstitial cells in the testes, and we'll talk more about that when we get to the reproductive system. Then we have growth hormone, which causes growth. It's a pretty simple one. Next is prolactin. Prolactin stimulates the mammary glands. During puberty, it stimulates their development, and then it's also released during pregnancy and during nursing to further cause development of the mammary glands. Then MSH is the next one, melanocyte stimulating hormone. It stimulates the melanocytes in the skin to increase their production of melanin. And that's the 2 hormones released by the posterior pituitary gland and give their function. So the posterior pituitary, we said it's neural tissue. These hormones are actually produced in the hypothalamus, but they're released by the posterior pituitary. ADH, which stands for antidiuretic hormone, sometimes also called vasopressin. It causes the kidneys to reabsorb water. It also will cause vasoconstriction. It will help to raise our blood pressure. And then oxytocin is the other one. Oxytocin stimulates smooth muscle. So it stimulates the smooth muscle of the uterus during childbirth. It also stimulates smooth muscles in the mammary glands, causing the ejection of milk. And it also plays a role in sexual arousal. Alright, how is hormone secretion typically controlled? And the simple answer is negative feedback. So we often have a releasing hormone from the hypothalamus, or a regulatory hormone, and it causes release of a hormone from the pituitary gland, and that hormone goes to the endocrine organ and releases the functional hormone, and that hormone will go back and inhibit release of this hormone from the pituitary, and also inhibit the release of the releasing hormone from the hypothalamus. So for example, TRH is released from the hypothalamus. It would cause TSH to be released from the pituitary. TSH would go to the thyroid gland and cause the release of thyroid hormone. And when thyroid hormone levels get high, they come back to the pituitary and inhibit release of TSH, and they would inhibit release of TRH as well. We see it also works with growth hormone. So when growth hormone releasing hormone is released from the hypothalamus, the pituitary is going to release growth hormone, which is going to go to different tissues and cause growth. It also goes to the liver and produces somatomedins, which are going to stimulate growth. It's also going to send a signal to inhibit the release of growth hormone, releasing hormone, and stimulate the release of growth hormone, inhibiting hormone. So using these negative feedback loops, we're able to keep the hormone levels at a good level. That way we don't grow faster than we have nutrients for. Alright, next is the 7 hormones released by the hypothalamus with their function. So these are all regulatory hormones. The first is CRH, corticotropic releasing hormone. and it goes to the pituitary and causes the release of ACTH. Next is TRH, thyrotropin releasing hormone, which goes to the pituitary and causes the release of TSH. Growth hormone releasing hormone and growth hormone inhibiting hormone both go to the pituitary and cause the release of growth hormone or stop the release of growth hormone. Then prolactin releasing factor and prolactin inhibiting hormone. Similarly, they go to the pituitary and either promote the release or inhibit the release of prolactin. And then gonadotropin releasing hormone GnRH goes to the pituitary gland and causes the release of FSH and LH. Growth hormone released by the hypothalamus. We already talked about these hormones. Next, we're going to talk about the thyroid gland. So the main hormone produced by the thyroid gland is in goat. The main hormone is thyroid hormone. If we take a closer look at it, we'll see there are these follicles which are making the thyroid hormone, and then there are these C cells which are producing calcitonin. Thyroid hormone is your major metabolic hormone, so it's going to increase metabolic rate, increase heart rate and blood pressure, also stimulate blood cell formation. And then calcitonin is released when blood calcium levels are too high, so it's going to stimulate bone growth and remodeling and cause more calcium to be put into the bone. Then on the back of the thyroid gland, we have the parathyroid gland. And these four little parathyroid glands, which release parathyroid hormone. And here's a closer look at it. Parathyroid hormone kind of works in opposition to calcitonin. So if blood calcium levels fall, you release parathyroid hormone. It will increase calcium absorption by the kidneys, increase calcium release from the bone by activating osteoclasts, also increases calcium triol production, which causes calcium to be absorbed from the digestive system. So all these things are going to increase blood calcium levels. And then calcitonin, which is produced by the thyroid, kind of does the opposite. It causes calcium to be deposited in bone, so calcitonin is released when blood calcium levels get too high, and they bring the blood levels back to normal. So this just shows up in table form. It affects the osteoblasts and osteoclasts. The thyroid gets calcium out of the bone and into the blood. Also, it's reabsorption of the kidneys and reabsorption in the digestive tract. Then the three main hormones released by the adrenal glands and their function. Here's the adrenal gland. And this table shows the treatment. So first we have mineralocorticoids and aldosterone. And aldosterone increases the absorption of sodium in water. Water follows the sodium. We'll talk about it more in detail when we get to the fluid balance chapter. Then the next would be the glucocorticoids, primarily cortisol. It's released when you're under stress, and it's going to increase the amount of glucose in the blood. It also reduces inflammation. And then it does produce some androgens. Epinephrine and norepinephrine we talked about with the autonomic nervous system. They're going to you ready for a fight, part of that fight or flight response, get you ready for a fight or get you ready to run away. So those are the hormones from the body. And what hormones are released by the pancreas, and which type of cell releases which hormone, and what are the effects of each hormone. Pancreas makes lots of digestive juices, which we'll talk about when we get to the digestive system. If we look closer, we see alpha cells, which produce glucagon, and glucagon is released when blood glucose levels drop. So it's going to raise blood glucose levels. And then the beta cells produce insulin. Insulin causes cells to take up glucose and lower the blood glucose level. So after you eat a meal that's high in sugar, your blood sugar level, blood glucose level is going to increase. And your body releases insulin to cause the cells to take up glucose and get the blood level back to normal. After you haven't eaten for a while, your blood glucose level will drop and your body will produce glucagon to raise it back up. So this shows that in the table form. So if blood glucose levels fall, we release glucagon, it's going to break down glycogen, increase the breakdown of fat to fatty acids, and increase the synthesis and release of glucose in the liver, how to get blood glucose back to normal. If blood glucose levels get high, like after a meal, the beta cells secrete insulin. It's going to increase glucose transport into cells, increase rate of glucose utilization and regeneration. It's going to convert glucose to glycogen, which is how glucose is stored in our body. It's going to increase amino acid absorption, protein synthesis, and also increase triglyceride synthesis. And all those things are going to bring the blood glucose levels down and get it back to normal. And what hormone is released by the pineal gland and what are its functions? The pineal gland is back here in the brain. Inhibiting reproduction functions. Not sure why that is. Protecting tissue damage against free radicals. But the main thing it does, I think, is the circadian rhythms. So anything that has a cyclical pattern may be involved in the pineal gland. So sleep obviously is one of these. This is why we make melatonin gummy to give to your kids to make them get sleep. So the pineal gland is melatonin, and its main job is this last one, setting the circadian rhythms. High blood glucose levels are characteristic of which endocrine disorder? And hopefully you know that's diabetes. And really know the differences between insulin-dependent and non-insulin-dependent diabetes. So too much blood sugar is diabetes. Type 1 is sometimes called juvenile diabetes. It's when the beta cells can't produce insulin. So these people have to take shots of insulin, and now there's pumps that can give them insulin. Type 2 is the more common form, and sometimes it's called insulin resistance because they make insulin, but their cells don't respond to it. It's also associated with obesity. And the theory is that we wear out the beta cells, and eventually, every time you eat a meal, sugar, you have to produce more insulin, and your beta cells can only make so much, and they just get exhausted, and then they stop making it, and that leads to this type 2 diabetes that can usually be controlled with diet and exercise. I don't know, there are some medications for that. Some of the clinical problems caused by diabetes, they all are grouped to have a problem with blood flow. And if the blood flow to the eyes is messed up, that causes diabetic retinopathy, which can lead to blindness. Blockages in the heart can lead to heart attacks. Lack of blood flow to the kidneys causes diabetic nephropathy, which leads to kidney failure. inadequate blood flow to neural tissues, causes diabetic neuropathy, the nerves don't function properly. A common problem is when blood flow to the feet or the toes is reduced. This can lead to tissue death, ulceration, infection, and these people may have to have toes or a foot. Alright, what can happen when a cell responds to more than one hormone at the same time? There's a couple of options here. The first is the effects can be antagonistic, which means they do the opposite thing. So like insulin and glucagon basically do the opposite thing. Antagonistic. The effects could be additive. So they could, so the example is growth hormone along with glucocorticoids. It's the glucospore function. So they can act together. Could be permissive. So an example of that is epinephrine with thyroid. So epinephrine is going to increase the metabolic rate of cells, but it only does that if thyroid is in concentrations. Or the effects could be integrated. An example of this would be calcitriol and parathyroid. They're both going to increase blood calcium levels, but their body generates separate mechanisms. So one might activate one enzyme complex and one activates the other. Liquid cells of the heart and kidneys have blood pressure is the next topic. So if our blood pressure increases, the heart is going to get stretched out. And there are cells in the heart that sense this and they release natriuretic peptides or AMP. And this is going to cause dilation of blood vessels, suppression of thirst, inhibition of antagonistic hormones, also sodium and water loss from the kidneys. All these things are going to work together to increase the blood volume and therefore the blood pressure and bring us back into homeostasis. If blood pressure drops, this is sensed to the kidneys because they're not getting enough blood flow and not enough oxygen. And we'll do two things: release EPO, erythropoietin, which is going to go to the red blood cells. It goes to the bone marrow and causes increased red blood cell production, which is going to increase the blood volume. And also activate the renin-angiotensin system by releasing renin. This causes aldosterone and ADH to be secreted, and it also stimulates thirst, so we're going to drink more. ADH is going to cause more water to be reabsorbed from the kidneys, and aldosterone causes more sodium and water to be reabsorbed, so that increases fluid intake and retention, which is going to increase the blood volume and therefore the blood pressure. Okay, next question is name 6 hormones that are involved in normal growth. And so this figure shows those hormones. The first one is growth hormone. Kind of starts the process. But also in order for normal growth to happen, we need several other hormones. One would be insulin. That ensures that we have enough energy and nutrients for the growth. 2 more are parathyroid hormone and calcitriol. These are both involved in calcium level regulation. They make sure we have enough calcium in the blood to grow. We need to have enough calcium in our bones for them to be strong. Thyroid hormone is required as well. That's going to make sure we have the energy. And then the last one we need is the reproductive hormones. They also affect our growth ability. So that's the 6 hormones that are involved in growth, just in case that's on your test. The stress response we're going to skip. You can read about it. It's not going to be on your test. 3 common causes of hormone hyposecretion, so not enough hormone being released. The first would be metabolic factors. An example of this is thyroid hormone. To produce that, you need iodine, and if you don't get enough iodine in your diet, you can't produce thyroid hormone. It could be physical damage. If an endocrine organ doesn't have enough blood flow, or if it's damaged somehow, it's going to become inactive. And then the third would be congenital disorders. So if the gland is too small, or you don't have the right enzymes, or the receptors are not sensitive enough, or if the gland cells don't have the receptors they need, these can all cause hyposecretion of hormones. So metabolic factors, physical damage, and congenital disorders. Then you don't have a group, so you got to do this on your own, but you're going to describe the endocrine disorders caused by hypo or hypersecretion of growth hormone, ADH, thyroxine, PTH, insulin, mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids, epinephrine and norepinephrine, estrogens, and androgens. So we'll start with growth hormone. Hyposecretion of growth hormone causes what's called pituitary growth failure, and these people will be very small. Hypersecretion, there can be 2 different things. Gigantism is when this happens before puberty, while you're still growing, and the people are very big, their bones are very long. If this happens after puberty, so at the end of puberty, growth plates in the bones close off, and with acromegaly, you'll get growth in the bones that don't have growth plates, such as your hands and your face. With ADH, hyposecretion leads to diabetes insipidus, where you pee a lot, you're very thirsty. Because you don't have antidiuretic hormone, you're not reabsorbing water from your kidneys. And then too much is SIADH. And with this, you reabsorb too much water, so that increases your body weight and water content. Next is thyroxine. If you don't make enough, you get what's called myxedema or cretinism, which will cause a very low metabolic rate, low temperature, impaired physical and mental development. Too much thyroid is known as hyperthyroidism or Graves' disease, leading to a very high metabolic rate and very high body temperature and weight loss. Then parathyroid hormone underproduction would be hypoparathyroidism, and in this case you'll have low blood calcium levels, which leads to muscle weakness and neurological problems. Also, you can form really dense bones. Too much PTH is known as hyperparathyroidism. Leads to neurological, mental, and muscular problems due to high blood calcium levels. It also leads to weak and brittle bones because the calcium is being removed from the bones and sent to the blood. And here's somebody with acromegaly. You can see he's a normal height, but his face is really, really big. This is called a goiter. This happens with thyroid hyposecretion, and the TSH is being released from the pituitary gland, and it's telling the thyroid gland to release thyroid hormone, but the thyroid gland can't make thyroid hormone because they don't have enough iodine. So the pituitary gland releases even more TSH, and TSH causes the thyroid gland to grow, but no matter how big it is, if it doesn't have iodine, it can't make the thyroid hormone. So that's what causes a goiter. And here's somebody with cretinism, which comes from not enough thyroid hormone, and the nervous system doesn't develop properly. Alright, next we have insulin. Underproduction of insulin is diabetes mellitus. diabetes insipidus, which we saw in the last slide. With this, you'll have high blood glucose. You can't use the glucose that you have. Overproduction doesn't really happen. Very rare. It could be caused by giving the diabetic too much insulin, but that will just lead to low blood glucose levels and it could cause a coma. Next we have the mineralocorticoids, known as hypoaldosteronism. If you don't make enough aldosterone, you'll have polyuria, which means you pee a lot because you're not absorbing sodium, so you're not absorbing as much water from the urine. This will lead to a low blood volume and high blood potassium and low blood sodium concentrations. Too much is known as aldosteronism. In this case, you would absorb too much sodium, and with that you'd absorb water, so that will increase your body weight and water retention. Also cause low blood potassium concentration, and you guys know you need sodium and potassium for generating action potentials, among other things. Next is the glucocorticoids. Underproduction of these leads to Addison's disease. It's the inability to tolerate stress and mobilize your energy reserves, or maintain normal blood glucose concentrations. Overproduction is called Cushing's disease. Causes excessive breakdown of tissue proteins and lipid reserves, also impaired glucose metabolism. For someone with Addison's disease, another sign of that is this bronzing of the skin. For someone with Cushing's disease, a sign of that is this pleasantly flushed face. The last few are epinephrine and norepinephrine. Nothing identified for underproduction of epinephrine, so apparently nobody in the world has that problem. Overproduction leads to what's called pheochromocytoma, very high metabolic rate, high temperature, increased heart rate, and elevated blood glucose levels. With estrogen, underproduction of that leads to hypogonadism, which means the gonads are too small. This leads to sterility and lack of secondary sex characteristics. And if you have too much estrogen, that can lead to adrenogenital syndrome, which is overproduction of androgens by the adrenal gland, which leads to masculinization. And another problem could be precocious puberty. This is premature puberty or sexual maturation. With androgens in males, underproduction of that leads to hypogonadism and sterility and lack of secondary sex characteristics. Overproduction can lead to adrenogenital syndrome, which is the abnormal production of estrogens in males. It can be due to adrenal or interstitial cell tumors, leads to breast enlargement. And too much androgens also can lead to precocious puberty and premature sexual maturation. Email me with any questions or anything